All right, y'all, we are back. It is day 9 of the SBF trial, and oh my God, things just go from hot to hotter. I genuinely thought I was gonna come into this week and it was gonna be a little calmer, a little chiller, have a little time to ease our way into the week. Nope, Nishad Singh gets on the stand and he brings, honestly, I think some of the hottest testimony we have heard in this entire trial, which I was not expecting. And maybe that's why they saved Nishad for last. Like everybody thought Caroline was going to be like the hot witness, and it turns out it's Nishad Singh after all. And I will say, of all of the top executives, the 4 that we hear about all the time, Nishad seems to have pushed back on Sam more than anybody else. So he can testify about conversations he said he had with Sam where he's clearly really pushing on Sam, and that makes for some very hot testimony. So I want to talk about one of those conversations in particular today. This is a balcony conversation, the balcony conversation. It was really, really interesting. So we're going to get into that a little bit later on, as well as getting into the time that Sam pretty explicitly or implicitly made it clear to Nishad that he was trying to fool the CFTC, which is something we had yet to hear. So lots of good stuff coming up. I do just want to say a couple of things. Up at the top here, Nishad was not actually our first witness today in court. We heard so much from Nishad, and yet we actually started today with a customer of FTX who was defrauded. This was somebody who was based in Canada who had deposited $500,000 on the exchange, lost all their money. I'm not even going to say anything about it. That was the story. It was a customer. They lost all their money. They were examined. They were cross-examined. Nothing particularly interesting came out of this. We all probably even know people who lost money on FTX, so it was a pretty standard customer story. But clearly the prosecution felt like they wanted to get yet another customer story out there for the jury to hear, and they did. And so I want to just skip on right on by that and get to Nishad. But first, I just want to say a huge shout out to OpenSea, Ledger, Web3 Sense. Those are our sponsors for the show, and I'm just so grateful to them for supporting Overpriced JPEGs, supporting me. It's a tough time for crypto content creators. So thank you so much to our sponsors. Okay. Getting into Nishad's testimony, let's start in late 2021, early 2022, what was happening at FTX and what was happening with Sam Bankman-Fried. Well, according to a number of different testimonies we've heard, but certainly Nishad's today, around this time, Sam was making a lot of venture investments. We've heard about this. We know about this. What we saw today that I don't believe we've ever seen before was an actual spreadsheet showing the company or the project that they were interested in investing in, and then the lead from FTX, whoever from FTX was taking the lead in handling that potential investment. And the names we saw were Ramnik Arora, who came out up a bunch today. We saw Adam Jin, and then we saw Sam Bankman-Fried. Notably, who was not listed ever as a lead on their investments? Caroline Ellison, Gary Wang, Nishad Singh, none of them were listed. So when I have said over and over again that these venture investment stuff was really a Sam Bankman-Fried project, and that we know based on the spreadsheets that those illiquid venture investments were a huge part, if not the problem, when it came to not being able to pay back customers, this just further emphasized that. We saw the spreadsheet that listed Sam as the lead on a lot of these investments, and we know that Ramnik Arora and Adam Jin were not like senior high-level strategy people in the sense that they didn't know everything that was going on like the way that Sam did. So we know that Sam was the one who was driving all of this. So I just want to emphasize that point because I really do think that's what people need to understand about this case almost more than anything else, because that is the problem, were these super illiquid investments that they were using very liquid liabilities to make. Okay, one of the investments that we see on there was $200 million to K5. Folks may or may not be familiar with K5, but Nishad on the stand today told us all about them, it was a company run by Michael Keeves. And Michael Keeves is key to this whole story because he was really Sam's door to celebrities. I think that FTX and Sam certainly had connections to some high-powered people before that, but Sam was really smitten, for lack of a better term, with Michael and K5 and the team there because they seemed to just be a one-stop shop, was I believe how Nishad described Sam as having described it, to like every relationship you could possibly want. Sam circulated a document, and we saw this in court today, that said basically that Michael had pulled together the single most impressive list of people he'd ever seen. Apparently, Michael held a dinner, and I don't know that Sam was necessarily at it, but Michael had a dinner that was with Hillary Clinton, Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband, Kylie and Kris Jenner, Jeff Bezos, Katy Perry, Orlando Bloom, like basically a who's who of people, but not within one specific industry. It was a who's who's of people ranging from business titans like Jeff Bezos, political titans like Hillary Clinton and Doug Emhoff, celebrities like Katy Perry, Orlando Bloom, Kris Jenner, Kylie Jenner, et cetera, et cetera. And so it seemed like what Sam saw here was the potential for reaching any celebrity he could possibly want, which we all know Sam loved his celebrity endorsements. So we then also saw a spreadsheet of what Sam spent on all these various different endorsement activities, including a lot of celebrity endorsements. And this spreadsheet, these endorsements came after he started doing deals with Michael Keeves. The endorsement stuff, the combination of like renaming the Miami Heat Stadium and then payments to Tom Brady, Larry David, etc., came to $1.1 billion. That's what we saw a spreadsheet listing that Sam was planning on spending on endorsements in 2022. Well, let me caveat that. So this spreadsheet was like, these were all deals basically that were done in 2022, I believe. Some of them, the payments were like multi-year payments. So he wasn't paying them all out at once, but the total was $1.1 billion paid out over a couple of years. And this is from a company that in 2021 made basically $1 billion total in revenue. And he had basically signed an entire year's revenue away over a couple of years endorsement deals. That included like $50 million to Tom Brady, $50 million. What did I say? $50 million to Tom Brady, $10 million to Larry David to do the Super Bowl commercial, another $18 million to Gisele's charity. You had, I think people knew the number, the $135 million they spent renaming the Miami Heat Stadium. And that is all separate from the $200 million they invested in K5, which is Michael Keeves', I guess like venture fund or something, to get access to some of the celebrities they ultimately signed many multi-million deals with. By the way, also, I should say, before I mind blow, the $1 billion revenue that they made in 2021 was itself somewhat fraudulent. They had made like $950 million, and then Sam had Nishad and some others do some things to push it over the edge to make it look like it was over $1 billion. In the grand scheme of things, it's kind of a small fraud relative to everything else because they were so close to that $1 billion in revenue anyways. But just in case you thought we were going to get through one part of this story without there being something like blatantly fraudulent, nope, can't even say that they'd made $1 billion in 2021 without that having been tainted by fraud. Okay, anyway, Nishad testified that he was horrified when he realized how much they were spending on endorsement deals, and that he had been shown that many months later, he was shown this document that we all saw in court demonstrating just how much Sam was spending and planning on spending on these various endorsement deals, this $1 billion+ number, and that he was like staggered by it and thought it was super irresponsible. He testified that he thought Sam's spending was, quote, excessive, and in fact, then he later on tried at various points to really like kind of beg Sam to get the spending a bit more under control. The second piece I'll mention all this is, you have the spending on the venture investments, you have the crazy amount of spending on the marketing deals, and then you have the real estate spending. Now, we did not get a total number for the real estate spending, but we did see a spreadsheet listing all of the real estate holdings of FTX, Alameda, whatever, and it was so much. They owned so many apartments in the Bahamas. And we knew about some of these. Obviously, you know about the penthouse where they all live. You know about Sam has an extra apartment in the Bahamas. We know his parents had a place in the Bahamas. But like, it was just apartment after apartment unit after apartment unit. It really was, it was crazy. And even Nishad said he didn't know about all of these. So the real estate spending, again, was just another one where hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on real estate. Okay, jumping ahead now in the timeline to June 2022. Everything I just described happened, it seems like a little bit more in like the early half of the year, though I'm sure some of it trickled into the later half of the year. But Nishad didn't find out about some of that until later in the year, which is he then testified to it. But in June 2022, this is another big month in the history of all this stuff. I've talked about June 2022 a lot over the course of covering this trial because, of course, in May 2022, you have Luna Terra collapse. The ecosystem is sort of imploding. So there's a lot of financial strife in crypto in general in June of 2022. And certainly FTX and Alameda were not immune to that. So in June is when you start to have meetings between the executives really trying to do a full accounting of everything. I won't go through it all because we've talked about it before. What I really want to highlight that I thought was most interesting about Nishad's testimony about June of 2022 is that as of that time, he claims he did not know that Alameda was using FTX customer money. And the reason I think this is so interesting is if he's to be believed, which I think he is, it just goes to show that while there was this like little cabal of 4 executives, Sam, Gary, Caroline, and Nishad, the 3 that weren't Sam at any given moment did not really have a complete picture of what was going on. I was so taken by the fact, or so struck by the fact, that Caroline did not know that Alameda had a $65 billion line of credit with FTX, that was the specific number. Nishad knew it, Gary knew it, they both testified to that. Meanwhile, Nishad didn't realize, apparently, that Alameda was using FTX customer monies as of June of 2022, but Caroline knew it, and Gary knew it, and Sam knew it. So what's so important about this is the defense and what Sam has tried to paint the picture of himself in the past is like, I had all these employees, I didn't know what was going on at any given moment in time, like I was relying on them to have the information, I was sometimes out of the loop. And in reality, what seems to be true is that the employees at any given moment of time really didn't know the full picture of what was going on. And Sam was the one who actually had all the information, because all of these people are testifying that the one person they talked to about everything was Sam. So it's just a complete inverse of what the defense is trying to claim, assuming that Nishad is to be believed and that he did not know as of June of 2022 that this was going on. In fact, he testified that it was only in September of 2022 that he actually really realized that Alameda was using FTX customer money for everything that they were doing, and really everything that Sam was doing investment-wise, etc. So we're going to get to how he found that out, but I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's really critical. So let's jump to September of 2022. A lot happens in the fall time period here, even before we get to the November collapse, as far as hot things that Nishad testifies to. In late August, very early September 2022, Nishad says that he ran a script on the FTX database, essentially, to see how much money Alameda had borrowed from FTX that was uncollateralized. So basically, Alameda had this infinity, essentially, line of credit with FTX. But for some reason, and I don't know if we got an answer as to why Nishad was doing this, but Nishad wanted to understand, okay, putting aside the line of credit for a moment, assuming Alameda was like a normal customer on FTX, how much money have they put up that needs to be collateralized that currently they haven't put up collateral for? And the number he came up with was $10 billion, which checks out. He's like, oh my God, there's $10 billion they're borrowing that is completely uncollateralized at this point. Nishad says this horrifies him. He is shocked by this number. He did not realize that this is the scope of what was going on. And he brings it to Sam's attention. Now, this is fascinating. Sam then, either immediately as a response or some period of time later, asks Nishad to send his personal holdings of Serum, we'll get to that in a second, to Alameda's account and to backdate the transaction to make it look like Alameda had been holding that Serum in their account for like the whole year or whatever. I don't know exactly when he wanted him to backdate it to. And Nishad testifies that Sam wanted him to do this specifically to quote, and this is now Nishad's quote, I don't know that if Sam said this specifically, but to fool the CFTC, to fool US regulators. So to explain this a little bit further, I've talked about this before, but Serum is one of the cryptocurrencies that FTX made up. We've talked about FTT quite a bit at points on this show, but Serum was another one that FTX executives had basically created out of thin air, but that traded and had some value because FTX as a company had value, and so customers believed in their tokens. And so, Nishad had his own personal share of Serum tokens, and Sam was saying, yeah, send that, put it in the Alameda account, backdate it to make it look like the transaction happened a while ago, so that when we get audited and whatever, it'll look like Alameda had posted a lot more collateral than they had, so that it looked like they were basically borrowing less money from that line of credit. Because anything that wasn't collateralized was essentially being borrowed from the line of credit that they had with FTX, and $10 billion being borrowed looked real bad. So pretend that there's more collateral in there. So those of us, the press corps, like the people in the room hearing this happen, were all pretty like looking around at each other when Nishad said it was to fool the CFTC. Because while it's not shocking in the sense that obviously this guy has been scamming people, this company was fraudulent, they were trying to pull the wool over a lot of people's eyes, we have not yet heard testimony from anybody that blatantly called out them trying to fool US regulators in such an explicit way. Now, again, it wasn't entirely clear to me if Sam said it really explicitly or if it was just clear to Nishad based on context and other things. But in either case, it's pretty damning and was wild to hear said in open court. Okay, so this gets us to the balcony conversation. And we'll talk about what happened on the balcony and why it's so important. But I do first want to hear a word from our amazing sponsors, OpenSea, Web3 Sense, Ledger. They make this show possible. I'm so grateful to them. Go check out more about them in the show notes, and let's hear it for our sponsors. Y'all know the phrase, not your keys, not your crypto. Well, in a world where too many people have had to learn that the hard way, Overpriced JPEGs is proud to partner with Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. Ledger's Nano S Plus and Nano X hardware wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, Ledger's own software for setting up your Nano device and managing your crypto assets, is the easiest way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control of your digital assets. You can use all your favorite dApps with Ledger Live, accessing 15 plus Web3 apps, including 1inch, Paraswap, Lido, and Zerion. So you can not only manage, but also grow your portfolio. And Ledger Live is available on mobile and desktop. Securing digital assets shouldn't be complicated. Ledger is as easy as it gets. Uncompromising security, effortless connectivity, full transparency, Ledger is your one-stop shop to trade and track crypto, grow your assets, and manage NFTs. Secure your future with Ledger. Visit shop.ledger.com today or check out the link in the show notes. Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about, Web3 Sense. A Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Sense has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. Let me tell you about OpenSea Studio. Yes, you know OpenSea. Perhaps you use OpenSea, but did you know they launched OpenSea Studio? It's a one-stop shop for all creators to launch and manage their projects. Using OpenSea Studio, you can create and manage a drop end-to-end, including setting up allow list phases, uploading media and metadata, which has helpful preview functionality, and building the drop page itself. You can also mint an NFT or collection where the creator owns the contract. OpenSea Studio lets you build on all blockchains compatible with OpenSea, and there are 8 of them. Lets buyers mint an NFT from your collection using a credit or debit card, and there are no coding or technical skills required to do any of the above. OpenSea will be adding more features and functionality to OpenSea Studio over the coming months, including revamped collection pages with new storytelling modules, and more ways to leverage NFT technology, including redeemables, which y'all know I'm a huge fan of, and analytics. I'm an OpenSea user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the NFT ecosystem, supporting, as I said, 8 chains in 8 global languages. And because I trust the systems they've built to help keep the space safe, like copyright protection, malicious URL detection or removal, robust verification, and more. It is why they are the place to buy, sell, and now create NFTs. Check them out at the link below, and you'll be supporting the show in the process. All right, we're back. So before we talk about the conversation on the balcony, I want to talk about what precipitated it, which is we've now heard from just about every witness that in September of 2022, Sam circulated a document to Nishad and to Gary suggesting that maybe they shut down Alameda. So Nishad and Gary and Sam then get on a thread with Caroline. Caroline says, yeah, it's going to be pretty much impossible to separate these two companies, but like, thanks for thinking of it. And at which point they decide to have a meeting. Nishad and Gary meet with Caroline. Nishad testified that Sam made, he said, what seemed like a lame excuse or something along those lines to get out of attending this meeting, which is interesting. So it was only the 3 of them who met. And it was basically at this time that Nishad learned that Alameda had been using FTX customer money. And first, he starts to suspect it because in the group chat with Sam present, Gary said that Alameda owed FTX $13 billion. And Nishad was like very alarmed when he read that in the message. And he said he was sitting next to Sam when that message came through to all of them, and Sam didn't seem surprised. And it was at that time that Sam kind of demurred from joining whatever meeting they were all going to have later. And Sam was like, he like made some quote unquote lame excuse. But Nishad said Sam didn't seem surprised by this number, which was shocking to Nishad because Nishad said he was shocked by this number, by this $13 billion that Alameda owed to FTX. And so the three of them meet, and it becomes very clear to Nishad after that meeting that this was a full-on hole. It was customer money. They couldn't pay it back, at which point Nishad is now very, very shaken and upset. So that night, he asks for a meeting with Sam, and he and Sam go out onto the balcony of their luxury apartment in the Bahamas. We saw a photograph of this balcony balcony is like understating it. I mean, it's huge. It's got a pool in the middle of it. Luxurious. And this is how that conversation went, according to Nishad. I'm paraphrasing slightly here, and I assume that Nishad himself was paraphrasing a little bit from what he remembered of the conversation with Sam. But Nishad was like very point by point about what was said. So here's roughly what he said. Okay. Nishad opened up the conversation by saying, Caroline is really concerned about the NAV situation, and so am I. So NAV is net asset value. It's your assets minus your liabilities. So are you positive or negative? Are you solvent, essentially? And Nishad said that he was using this term as shorthand to ask about the hole. Like, we're worried about this hole in the balance sheet. To which Sam said, don't worry, NAV is super, super positive by any measure. Now, what's interesting about that response is NAV was definitely not super, super positive by any measure. As somebody who has now looked at like the internal balance sheets that was going on, that's a generous statement. Now, Sam, I guess, was very bullish on these investments he had made and things like Anthropic and the mining company and whatever. I guess it's in Sam's favor that he said this at the time. And I guess it speaks to the fact that maybe he believed at the time that they were that their NAV was super, super positive. And again, I think arguably it was, but I think arguably it also wasn't. So, because he also was definitely overvaluing like the FTT, and Sam seems to, in his own mind, include his own personal holdings very regularly when he calculating what FTX had on their balance sheets. So he was probably doing that bullshit Sam math in his head. In any case, he says, don't worry, NAV is super, super positive by any measure. To which Nishad says, he said, but what about what Gary and Caroline were saying today about this $13 billion hole? To which Sam responds, right, that we are a little short on deliverables. So again, what he's saying here is, yeah, in the short term, it's hard to make some of these payments, but our NAV is positive, and like in the long term, we'd be okay. Gary then says, how much short? Sam then says, wrong question. He may not have said it like that, but he said, that's the wrong question. The right question is, how much can we deliver? Right now, $5 billion, but in a few weeks more than that, and after that, even more still. So again, he's saying, look, don't worry about it. Right now, we only have $5 billion liquid, but in time, we'll have more money liquid. To which Nishad apparently said, Jesus effing Christ. At least somebody's understanding the magnitude of the situation. And then Sam says, yeah, this has been taxing my productivity about 5 to 10% over the last year. So we've actually heard this quote before. I don't know, a reporter apparently got hold of this at some point, because this is something that has been reported on, Sam saying that, which is just, it's just such a stupid answer. And then Nishad says, this is going to affect me a lot more than that. Nishad's being like, I'm really upset to hear this. And then Sam said, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have circulated that document about shutting down Alameda. I should have known it could freak people out. And then Nishad says, well, what are we going to do? And then Sam said, I'm not too worried. We can sell off some of Alameda's assets and more valuable properties over time. We can raise money. And then he also said that the FTX US futures business, so at the time they were trying to get a license to allow futures trading for FTX US, that'll be great and that'll generate revenue. So he sort of seems to feel like if the business just goes well or goes better, it'll all be fine. And then Nishad asks, will you cut expenses? Sam says, yes, working on that. Narrator, they did not particularly cut expenses after this point, but okay. And then Nishad testified that he left this conversation, quote, blindsided and horrified. So he was asked, did you consider resigning? He said he did, but he felt really conflicted because he felt like the best chance for customers getting their money back was the company doing well. And he felt like being there, he was really helpful to the company, and that if he left, it could leave them even more vulnerable to collapsing, and then the customers would definitely lose all their money. So I understand that logic. It's the most generous interpretation of things. Maybe he had some more selfish reasons as well, but I understood that logic at least. But this testimony is so important because the truth is I can't think of another bit of testimony that so clearly demonstrates that Sam explicitly knew about the hole and explicitly knew that customer money was being used and explicitly knew that after which point you can say like any money Sam spent after this, he knew was coming from customers. Now, obviously, every witness has testified to this in some way, but even with Caroline's testimony, who we all thought was going to be the star witness, the truth is it was all a lot more implicit. It seemed like they just had an understanding that they were using customer money because Sam had been doing it for forever. And so she never described an explicit conversation in which that really came out. And, Caroline shared all these different spreadsheets with Sam that we saw where implicit in the calculations was using customer money, but they never said it outright. And this feels like really Sam just acknowledging, yeah, there's this hole, and yeah, we're not liquid in the short term, but it's going to be fine. The only other testimony is we did hear Adam Yedidia talk about that conversation that he and Sam had on the paddle tennis courts that felt sort of along these lines, and that was in June of 2022. But this one just hit in a different way, and everybody in the press corps, all of us walked out of this testimony just being like, damn, how's the defense going to wriggle out of this one? The only thing you can do is make it sound like Nishad had no idea what he was talking about. He's either outright lying, he totally misunderstood, whatever, because the specificity with which he described the scene and described what each of them said, it just really is quite striking. And yet, after that point, Sam did not tamp down all that much on expenses. Nishad said he did a little bit. He noticed a few, cosmetic, essentially, changes. But in late October, Sam goes to the Middle East. He's meeting with Mohammed bin Salman. He's meeting with Saudis to talk about raising money. But he also has a meeting with some Telegram executives or officials or whatever, and he starts messaging a group of FTX employees and Alameda employees, like executives from the two companies, via Signal, talking about how excited he is about a potential partnership with Telegram that basically would amount to FTX building some sort of direct payment thing within Telegram, and in exchange, FTX would get a shit ton of Telegram's shitcoins or tokens. I don't know, maybe they're worth something, but Telegram's crypto. And Nishad said that Sam didn't mention anything about there being a cost of all this to FTX, but that Ramnik Arora, I believe, who was on the trip with Sam, was the one who then chimed in and was like, oh yeah, and by the way, we'd have to pay $125 million to get all these tokens and for the privilege of doing all of this or whatever. At which point, Nishad and Caroline, apparently in this group thread, started to vehemently oppose this investment and this deal. They were like, no, please do not spend another $125 million of customer money, though they didn't say that explicitly, in exchange for Telegram shitcoins. What are you thinking? Now, Nishad says he did not specifically say because we'd be spending customer money to do it, because they were in a group chat with 11 FTX and Alameda executives, not all of whom knew about what was going on, but they just heavily pushed back. And that ultimately Sam told the whole group, hey, look, I like this. We're doing this deal. If anybody has reasons to object to this beyond what I've already heard, let me know. Otherwise, I'm pulling the trigger. And he said, apparently, Sam said in the group chat, this is not y'all's responsibility. Don't worry about it. And then he said that Sam then separately messaged Caroline and Nishad in the group chat that they were in with Gary and Sam, just that small group of the 4 executives, reiterating, hey, this is not your decision. This is not your responsibility. Don't worry about it. I'm going to go make this decision. Why do I bring this up? There was so much that came out in all of the testimony today, but I bring up this in particular because I think it points to this growing sense I've had around just how dishonorable Sam is. And I know that might sound weird because you're like, yeah, Carly, he defrauded customers of $8 billion. We all knew he was dishonorable. But it's just hitting me how just pathetic it is to be a leader who is very willing to have all of the glory, all of the magazine covers, all of the fame and the money when things are going well, to then tell your employees things like, this is not your responsibility. Don't worry about it. It's my responsibility. I'm on it, whatever. To then, when everything goes bad, completely point at your employees, and specifically in this case, Caroline Ellison, and just blame them. A captain goes down with their ship. even if it wasn't Sam's fault, even if Sam wasn't the one making all the venture investments, even if it was Caroline running the books into the ground, you were the CEO, you got all the glory in the good days, you get the shit when it goes bad. But it was his fault, and he's not doing that. And it's just so cowardly. Like, own your mistakes. And it's tough because he hasn't been convicted yet. I haven't heard the defense mount their case yet. And I really do believe in keeping an open mind. And I've seen the movie 12 Angry Men. It's a great film. I want to leave room for reasonable doubt. But everything we have heard has just so consistently backed up each other's stories of Sam being at the helm of these companies. And I just think it is incredibly dishonorable and cowardly to then, when it all goes down, blame the people who worked for you and who suffered for you. And to this point, I have one final piece of today's testimony that I want to talk about. And this is that Nishad testified that in November of 2022, as everything is blowing up, everything is going down, it sounds like what I'm about to talk about happened maybe on like November 6th, November 7th. I can't remember exactly. FTX employees are freaking out. They are understandably not at their most productive because they have just found out that there's this hole in the balance sheet. And Nishad was worried about all of that. And the truth was they needed FTX employees to keep working because there was a chance at that point that Binance could bail them out. There was still hope that maybe something could go right. And so they still needed the employees. And Nishad was hoping that a statement from Sam or that there were some things that could maybe help the situation. So it's in that vein that Nishad sent Sam a signal message. Now, we actually were able to read this signal conversation because Nishad had started screenshotting messages between, or had either that or had turned off the disappearing message thing in his conversations with Sam, as Caroline, I think, had testified a lot of people started to do in November when things were starting to go down. So Nishad sends Sam a message that says essentially this: "This might be wildly selfish of me, but they," meaning the employees, "may need to know that it wasn't a ton of people orchestrating it being the fraud. I think it makes them more likely to want to be here and help save the situation and others, at least, as in save others. As in if the employees realized that this wasn't like a company-wide conspiracy, that they were one of the few people that, weren't in on it, that they'd be more likely to want to help save the situation, save the customers, save other employees." And the other thing that Nishad said he was trying to do in this message, and this was the maybe this is selfish piece, is he wanted Sam to clarify that he hadn't known about this until very recently, that it was a very tiny a very tiny number of people who even knew about this. It seems like it was just Gary, Sam, Caroline, and Nishad. But not only that, Nishad had basically just found out 2 months prior. And Nishad testified that he basically wanted Sam to clarify that, like, Sam had orchestrated this. Sam was the problem, and that a couple other people knew, but even Nishad didn't know that much. And this was partly precipitated because Nishad he testified, a very unpleasant phone call with Dan Freeberg, who was like basically general counsel at FTX. And we also saw some signal messages between Nishad and Sam about the conversation Nishad had with Dan Freeberg, where Nishad signal messaged Sam just being like, yeah, he basically thinks it's the three of ours fault. The three of ours, which by the way, at the time, Nishad said he meant Nishad, Gary, and Sam. So Caroline wasn't even in there. The FTX general counsel believed it was the three of theirs fault. Nishad testified that we saw the signal message in which Nishad sent that to Sam saying, Dan Freeberg thinks it's the three of ours fault, and was like really screaming at me about how he's blaming me. And Sam says, sounds about right. So now fast forward, Nishad is saying when he sent this signal message saying like selfishly I wanted him to clarify, he was like, it was also because I wanted my relationship with some of these people repaired, like with Dan, our general counsel. And I wanted Sam to say it was him and not me. And Sam responds to that, yup. For what it's worth, FWIW, I don't think that's super selfish. I think that's probably correct. Now, as far as I know, Sam never made such a statement to anybody, to the company. He never actually took responsibility. He has only ever blamed other people. And it's the point that I just made above, so I won't say it again here, but I think it's really cowardly, and it makes me feel for Nishad a little bit, even though obviously the moment he realized what was going on, he should have gone to the FBI. All right, folks. There was so much more to today's testimony. I think I may do 2 mini episodes that are like 5-10 minutes long to break down some specific other pieces of this. Maybe this weekend I'll try and put out some extra bonus content, because I do think there's some other interesting things to talk about here, like the political donation stuff, which was crazy, and some other things. But anyway, thank you so much for being on this journey with me. Thank you for all of your likes and your comments and subscribing. I really appreciate it. And with that, I will see you tomorrow.